There are some things that you just don't do to a Porsche, and swapping the engine is definitely one of them. Porsche won't sue you like Ferrari might, but the purists, they'll treat you like you've just insulted their entire family lineage. But here's the thing, old Porsche engines blow up, and they do it pretty often, so sometimes an engine swap is your best option. You've really got two choices: rebuild the original engine, which will probably cost a fortune, or go for a used engine, which is much cheaper, unless you're aiming for crazy horsepower. But cost isn't the main factor here, at least not with the projects in this video. The main reason is, you can have some fun with the swap and drop in something wild, like a Formula 1 engine from a McLaren bolide, just like Lanzante did with the Porsche 930. Not wild enough? How about fitting a Boeing Jet Engine into a 928? The possibilities are endless, and I've gathered the craziest ones in my top 10 craziest engine swap Porsche builds ever. Let's get into it. Mitsubishi swapped 1980 Porsche 911. The 1980 911 is a classic. This generation of the 911 has built a loyal fan base over the years. However, for the one tuner, the charm of the 911 wasn't enough to keep it stock. Enter Eric Plabani, who took his Porsche in an entirely different direction. When he set out on the project in the 1990s, Eric faced a tough decision: spend $60,000 on an aftermarket Motec system to squeeze 500 horsepower out of the air-cooled engine, or take a more radical approach by swapping it for a nearly bone-stock Mitsubishi 4G63 engine to achieve the same power. Ultimately, he went for the latter, a bold decision, especially considering that the original engine was running perfectly fine. Anyway, this choice transformed the car into a true rocket ship. Initially, the build produced an impressive 650 horsepower, but it has since evolved to crank out a staggering 800 horsepower while still using the original Porsche drivetrain. And this isn't just a showpiece, Eric daily drives this beast. As the tuner says, one of the biggest challenges of the build was to integrate a water-cooled system into the air-cooled chassis. Weighing in at just 2,600 pounds, this 911 can sprint through the quarter mile in the high 10s, which is quite impressive for an 80s Porsche. 1JZ swapped Porsche Cayenne. When talking about engine-swapped Porsche builds, you probably never think of a family SUV that would make the list. Yet here we have a Porsche Cayenne Turbo S from Russia, featuring a factory engine swap that may raise some eyebrows among purists. It's now powered by a Toyota 1JZ GTE. There's no clear reason why the engine was swapped. Whether the original engine failed or the owner just wanted something unique remains a mystery. What we do know is that this isn't just any stock 1JZ. That wouldn't make sense, since a stock 1JZ only puts out 276 horsepower, which is nearly half of what the original Cayenne engine delivered. This Toyota powerhouse has been turbocharged and given a nitrous boost, cranking out an impressive 450 horsepower thanks to a VEMS ECU. Like the previous project, this beast was built to be a daily driver, proving that you can enjoy high performance without sacrificing practicality. K-swapped 930. No matter the car brand, you're bound to find a K-swap build. It's affordable, compact, has a lot of potential, and easy to work with, so it's no surprise one made this list. This time, a Honda K20A2 found its way into a 1982 Porsche 911. What's interesting is that the car had already been swapped with a V8, but that engine gave out just 2 hours after the car was bought. After that, Scott Girondo, the mastermind behind this project, rolled the 930 into the garage and swore he'd build it better than the last guy. The result? A turbocharged K-swap that not only looks incredible, but also produces 470 horsepower. A similar wild project was done by YouTuber Stanceworks, but that one was based on a Ferrari 308 GTB, which I mentioned in my video about Ferrari builds. But back to the Porsche, as it wasn't just about power. Scott also upgraded the suspension for better handling, adding racing wheels for extra grip, and gave the car an aggressive look with custom bumpers and mirrors. With all these upgrades, the car turned out perfectly. V8 swapped Porsche 912. What you are looking at is a piece of engine swap history as the very first Porsche powered by a V8 engine. The build itself isn't anything too wild, just another LS swap, but it's the backstory that makes this one really special. It all starts with a brand new 1966 Porsche 912 being purchased and then stolen the next year. They recovered the car without its engine and some other components, and it was sold to a famed endurance racer, Dennis Oz. Dennis installed another 911 motor and upgraded the brakes and transaxle for SCCA racing. After placing second overall in B production that season, he decided he wanted another vehicle and put this car up for sale. Dennis wanted to keep the 911 motor and sold the roller to Rod Simpson. Rod didn't have the money to purchase a 911 or 912 motor, so Rod spent a year designing and fabricating his own parts that would allow a Chevy V8 to work in the little Porsche. Rod took his Porsche out racing in 1968, and in doing so made plenty weep for joy and others in sorrow. The combo received so much interest, Rod was able to turn it into a profitable business called Rod Simpson Hybrids that sold swap kits for others wanting a V8 powered Porsche. The V8 powering this beast has gone through plenty of upgrades and now puts out around 600 horsepower. That level of power and torque in a vehicle weighing 1,980 pounds will result in some great numbers. When the 912 was running on the 500 horsepower configuration, it reached 270 miles per hour on the 1.1 mile straightway at Riverside Raceway. On the same day, the 912 was able to get within 0.3 seconds of a Porsche Carrera RSR being tested by the factory Porsche team. Rotary swapped 1966 911. Yes, you heard that right, a rotary swapped 911. And don't even let its modernized looks fool you. Underneath, this is an early model, classic 911. For whatever reason, the owner has decided to transform it into an epic hybrid between a Porsche 911 and a Mazda RX-7. Porsche purists would go mad, especially considering this 1966 Porsche 911 was the first 911 to get Porsche's iconic Mezger engine. According to the owner, the rotary engine is brand new with everything being polished of chrome. It also features a single turbo that's big enough to handle 480 horsepower on low boost. Owner says that the engine can be tuned for up to 690 horsepower, but wants to keep things civil for the street. Power goes to the rear wheels through a built Porsche 915 transmission. The car started as a 1966 Porsche 911, but Jeffrey decided to go with a 993 aesthetic for the most part. The end result is a car that can easily pass for a Porsche 964 Turbo, because the 993 had more heavily sloped front wings. We don't know what the car looked like before the transformation, but it may have been a shell, judging by the owner's words. This would explain the controversial swap, given the Porsche Boxer engines are an inherent 911 trait. Jeffrey made the extensive use of 993 bits, including the door mirrors, door handles, and fixed rear windows instead of the original pop-out ones. The most obvious addition is the iconic white tail at the back, which came from a 993 GT2. The front bumper is also from a 993. There is another Mazda part on this Porsche, the sunroof, which comes from an RX-7. The only original body part remaining on this car is the front hood. Subaru EJ25 swapped Porsche 911 GT3. There are actually two EJ25 swap builds that are worth mentioning. One is based on the 997.1 generation 911 GT3, and the other one on the 1976 911. Let's start with the GT3. The car started as a rolling shell, having been crashed and then stripped out by the previous owner. The battered GT3 was then handed over to Farouk Kugay of DevSpeed Motorsports. Kugay selected an EJ25 engine from the 2008 Subaru Impreza WRX STI for the swap. The idea was to keep the GT3 Boxer powered, even with few cylinders missing. That would best fit its rear engine layout. The EJ25 also suited the aim of building an all-out track car. It weighs a full 170 pounds lighter than the GT3's original flat 6. Plus, it can be tuned to exceed the original GT3's 415 horsepower as stock. In pursuit of power goals, the STI engine was treated to a Borg-Warner turbo. Supporting mods included a new intercooler, injectors, and fuel pumps. With all those mods, the engine put down 550 horsepower. The livery chosen pays tribute to the car's diverse roots. It draws the long flowing lines from the classic Salzburg Porsche 1917 race car. As for the color scheme though, that's pure Subaru, taken from the company's World Rally Championship cars. And you know what? That looks fantastic. This livery combined with those wheels look just right. Now, to the second EJ25 build. This project began as an engineless 1976 911. It was purchasing it with the idea of repowering it with a Subaru power plant. Austin, the tuner behind this project, was doing some research and came across the Midnight Club's legendary Blackbird 911. Immediately, an aesthetic plan began to take shape in Austin's mind, and he became hell-bent on finding a set of TBK bumpers to match that car. After getting the body kit, custom rocker panels were built to tie it all together, and the car was refinished in midnight purple. Of course, that color needs no introduction, but compared to the boxier R34 that originally received the hue, the multicolored finish looks extra striking on this wide 911 with its soft, contoured surfaces. The exterior is rounded off with an RSR 3.8 wing with a carbon fiber blade in addition to meaty M1 wheels. The turbo hangs off the rear end, where there's actually a lot of extra space. The Boxer 4 appears surprisingly small in the engine bay, but I guess that shouldn't really be a surprise given that you can wedge an LS V8 in the back of a 911. LS swapped RWB 993 911. For this project, the tuner bought an engineless 993 that came with automatic transmission. Rather than going for a traditional air-cooled engine, the tuner decided to go a different route. A brand new LS3 engine from GM. This engine, similar to the one found in a 2013 Camaro, delivers 430 horsepower right out of the box. To make the swap work, the car was paired with a 996 transmission, and because it was originally air-cooled, the tuner had to build a custom water cooling system for the LS3. But the build doesn't stop there. What makes this 993 even more special is the RWB body kit, installed by Nakai-san himself, and the John Player special livery only makes it better. With its wide body stance, the iconic livery, and the thunderous sound of the LS3, this Porsche turns heads wherever it goes. Bentley V8 swapped Hot Rod 911. Now this. Can we even call this thing a Porsche? I mean, it used to be one at some point in the past, but now it's more of a hot rod than a Porsche. This project has been built by Alexandre Danton, who has made a name for himself building wild American-style inspired hot rods out of European exotics and classics. Danton Arts Customs is certainly not your typical workshop, and likewise, this Porsche is anything but typical. This Targa is a wild mashup of different styles, drawing inspiration from around the globe. The elephant in the room is the big V8 up front, but being a European build, you couldn't simply sell out and drop an LS in it. Of course not. So the builder opted for turbocharged British power in the form of a 675L V8, poached from a Bentley Mulsanne turbo. Capable of nearly 300 horsepower at the wheels and factory trim, the Mulsanne boasted somewhat comical performance numbers thanks to weighing a monumental 5,051 pounds. But I imagine that in the Targa that turbo engine finds itself powering, it is now properly terrifying at speed. The suspected level of terror is thanks in part to the custom-built suspension which shares nothing with the 911 body it supports. The front features a double wishbone setup while the rear is taken care of with a solid axle. It's not exactly a canyon carver, but absolutely is a hot rod. Boeing T50 swapped 928. This build really is crazy. Literally. A 1982 Porsche 928 had its 4.5-liter V8 swapped out for a Boeing T50 jet engine, complete with turbine in front and twin exhausts poking through the hood. The engine can be heard running in a short YouTube video below that shows the red 928 with a hood that can't quite be closed completely, idling quite loudly while a couple of very curious spectators stand just a few steps away. The conversion was done by an Oregon man who listed the 365 horsepower beast on eBay in 2010 for $20,000. The seller claimed the car was capable of speeds in excess of 160 miles per hour, would deliver 17 miles per gallon, and could run on diesel fuel. The car eventually sold for $12,000. In a post on Renlist, the seller, identified as Daniel5691, said that medical bills were forcing him to part with their unique creation. Daniel said that the car ran and drove, something that was proven by another YouTube video dated 14 years ago. That video included a comment from a user named Scott Hammonds, who claimed he still owned the 928 as of a year ago. Keeping the car ran counter to the advice Daniel gave in his Renlist post, which was to flip the car and pocket the proceeds. "I recommend fixing it up a little," he wrote, "as you could potentially make a substantial profit." He went on to add some details about the build, including the fact that the jet engine weighed less than the factory V8. He added digital gauges for exhaust gas temperature, oil pressure, and oil temperature, although the latter two were not working properly at the time of sale. Honorable mention: Oil Stain Lab HF11. While I was working on the script for this video, the new supercar company Oil Stain Lab dropped their latest project, the HF11. I checked it out and realized it's something I've never seen before. This thing is absolutely insane, and surprisingly, it fits perfectly into the topic of this video. What timing? So everything started with a wild Porsche 911 based project car known as the Half 11. The car was literally a half of 911, specifically the front half, to which Oil Stain Lab added a rear subframe and installed an LS V8 engine. According to twins Nikita and Elia Bridan, professional car designers who founded Oil Stain Lab in 2019, the goal was to build the type of race car that Porsche might have built if the only model it ever had was the 911. The Half 11 has managed to attract potential buyers, especially after Oil Stain Lab showcased it during this year's Goodwood Festival of Speed in the UK. Now the company has revealed a more polished design destined to be built in a limited run of just 25 cars. Oil Stain Lab calls the new design HF11, which will come with both gas and electric powertrains. But here's the most impressive part. You can easily swap the powertrain right in your own home garage. They call this swapping system Thundervolt, describing it as a subframe swap instead of a traditional powertrain swap. The inspiration for this idea came from a 24 hours of Le Mans race, where Audi swapped their rear subframe on one of its cars in just 4 minutes. The Thunder in its name refers to a planned gas engine, a bespoke 4.5-liter flat six that will be tuned to deliver about 650 horsepower and rev to 12,000 RPM. The Volt refers to the electric powertrain, in this case a single electric motor rated about 850 horsepower. Details on the battery and how it would be stored in the chassis weren't mentioned, though Oil Stain Lab said both powertrains can be paired with either a 6-speed manual transmission or 7-speed sequential unit. The design looks like a mix of a modern 911 RSR race car and a classic 917. Carbon fiber is used for the construction, including for the bespoke central tub that Oil Stain Lab said took 2 years to develop. One of the goals was to ensure the car would only weigh about 2,000 pounds, while still being street legal. Oil Stain Lab is currently accepting orders and has confirmed a starting price of $1.85 million. That's with the gas powertrain only. Order the electric powertrain on top, and the price rises by $500,000. I'm pretty sure most buyers will stick with the internal combustion option, but the concept alone is enough to make this project stand out. McLaren F1 powered 930. Over the years, there have been several cars to use F1-derived engines. The Ferrari F50, Porsche Carrera GT, and most recently, the Mercedes-AMG 1 all have modified F1 piston pushers. However, only one road-legal car uses actual race-driven Formula 1 engines, Lanzante's Porsche 930 TAG Turbo. In the mid-1980s, Renault's turbocharged V6 engine was kicking ass in F1 and McLaren needed something that could rival it. So it turned to Porsche, who, with financial backing from TAG, a company that is widely known for its watches, developed a twin-turbo 1.5-liter V6 that made more than 1,000 horsepower. With that engine, which was designed by Porsche legend Hans Mezger, McLaren drivers Niki Lauda and Alain Prost won 3 F1 straight drivers' championships. And you can get that very engine in a Porsche 930 thanks to Lanzante. A few years ago, Dean Lanzante, who works with McLaren on race cars, restorations, and high-priced builds, decided to buy 11 of McLaren's TAG Porsche engines. McLaren wouldn't sell the original engine, but did sell the 11 engines used throughout the 84-86 season. So the engines Lanzante is putting in its 930 TAG turbos were actually used by McLaren in F1. As cool as it would be to drive a full-power F1 engine on the street, Lanzante worked with Cosworth to rebuild and re-engineer the engines to make them more usable on the road. They were detuned to 510 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, probably for a good reason, and a front-mounted water cooler radiator was added. However, they still rev to 9,000 RPM and have a top speed of 200 miles per hour. Shifting gears is done with a 6-speed manual, and a limited slip rear diff helps power the rear wheels. While Lanzante's Porsche 930 TAG turbos are made to order, and customers are allowed a high level of customization, they're kept as period correct as possible. Inside and out, these TAG turbos look like mostly stock Porsche 930s. Interiors are custom, but only period correct options are allowed. The chassis and bodies are mostly made from aluminum, and there's also a healthy dose of carbon fiber to keep things extra light, shedding 441 pounds off the stock 930. That's all I have for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.